This video is in response to a tweet put out by Vivek Ramaswamy today. I just want to say I think that he's been great, awesome, well put together, outspoken, courageous, articulate, all of those things. I think that responses to the questions that you were given on CNN regarding January 6th were Johnny on the spot. And because you're so well put together and because you're so good at what you do, I'm curious about this statement that you made on Twitter in response to Brandon Straka. And it says, I'll keep my promise of a day one pardon for all nonviolent protesters that day. Won't wait until the last day in office. It'll be done on January 20th, 2025. So the issue with that statement is nonviolent protesters, right? That is simply just not going to work. The statements about pardoning nonviolent protesters, those were statements that January 6th concerned citizens and politicians and journalists were asking about and were making back in 2021. But they're no longer acceptable now. Why is a statement like pardoning nonviolent protesters no longer acceptable? Well, that's very simple. We now know, everybody knows, you know, that there was an untold amount of violence at the Capitol on January 6th. And that in many cases, protesters had to defend themselves or they had to defend other people who were being attacked by the police. That puts people in a very precarious situation. Number one, you have a right to protest without being attacked by the cops. Number two, you have a right to self-defense if you are attacked by the police, even against the police. And number three, you have a right as a citizen, although you don't have a duty to be a good Samaritan, you have a right to defend others under the third-person defense doctrine or the doctrine of defense of others. So the vast majority of the people who went to the Capitol on January 6th had no criminal records, no history of violence. So how is it that so many of them have been charged with violent acts? Well, that is because on multiple occasions, the cops were macing people, spraying people directly in the face with bear spray, tear gassing people, shooting people with rubber bullets who were doing nothing. They were absolutely peaceful. Those people grew in anger and they confronted the cops and they said, hey, we're standing here. We have every right to be here. You're not allowed to do this to us. And the cops did not care and continued to be aggressive anyway, and a conflict ensued. And all those people who were caught on video were charged with violence. And in your statement alludes to the fact that you're not going to consider those people for a pardon. That doesn't work. There are also multiple people who were physically assaulted by the police, and they defended themselves. They had the right to do that. Your statement precludes those people from being pardoned as well. That doesn't work. And in many cases, they were good men with no criminal records, no prior violence of history of any kind, who saw women and older people getting the crap kicked out of them by the police, getting maced, getting beaten, getting shot with bullets, and in some instances, people even died. A good man can't go home and put his head down on his pillow at night and say, I let a woman get beat to death in front of me today. Good men step up and they defend the innocent, they defend the weak, they defend the elderly, and they certainly defend women, even when the police are the wrongful actors, are the aggressors. And your statement, your tweet here, precludes those good men from due consideration for pardons because you have narrowed the scope of the field in terms of the people you're willing to consider for a pardon to simply people who were not charged with violence. I want you to think about Kyle Rittenhouse, Mr. Ramaswamy, and think about the level of violence that Mr. Rittenhouse used. His violence was entirely justifiable. He was attacked in the street by a pedophile maniac and other people. His life was in danger. They were swinging a skateboard at his head. So all these people around him. He was in a reasonable fear for his life, and he used deadly force. And he won at trial because the law says you are allowed to use deadly force. And he walked, and he should have walked, and I support his actions on that day. There are many January 6ers who were in similar situations. Although none of them used deadly force, they responded with force. If you showed up to the Capitol and you had a can of mace on you, and an officer sprays you in the face with OC spray, with bear spray, right, and you didn't do nothing wrong, you have a right to spray back. If you're standing there and an officer reaches over and punches you in the face, you have a right to punch back. If you're standing there and an officer takes a MAGA grandma and throws her down the stairs, you have a right to step in and to defend that MAGA grandma. And in many cases, and in the vast majority of cases, this is exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about good men with no criminal records, who went to the Capitol for a legitimate political purpose, who could have never anticipated the level of violence they encountered that day. And when they encountered that violence, they took appropriate remedial action. And in many situations and during many occurrences, these men first tried to de-escalate. They're on video saying, "We're here peacefully. We love you. We don't want a problem." But the cops just kept pushing and spraying and shooting and slapping. And violence happened on many occasions. And for you to say that you're only going to pardon non-violent January 6th protesters, that just doesn't cut it. It doesn't work. It does not pass January 6th muster. This is the kind of stuff we heard Ben Shapiro talking about, Ted Cruz talking about, and a bunch of other weak sauce Republicans in Congress and in the media who were like, the people who were violent deserve to go to jail and everybody else should go free. No, that's not the way it works. That is not the way it works. Okay? Mr. Ramaswamy, if you were there on January 6th and an officer sprayed your wife in the face, or an officer shot your child with a rubber bullet, or if an officer pushed your mother or your father or your sister or your loved one to the ground, you may have said, "Hey, officer, don't do that again." And if the officer did it again, it's very likely you would have taken action in defense of your family and your friends and your loved ones, because that's what good men do. That's what good men do. Good men in the United States of America are allowed to go to protests without being attacked by police. And when they're attacked by police, American citizens are allowed to defend themselves, because we don't live in communist China. And if you become president, are you going to pardon only nonviolent protesters? That answer doesn't work. I need you to give us clarity. I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt here. But because you've been so Johnny on the spot with everything else, I'm wondering about what you're saying. Right? You're a man of precision and accuracy, but I want to give you the benefit of the doubt. I want to give you an opportunity to clarify your statement. You're a bright guy. You're a smart guy. You're an articulate guy. But this tweet, when you're talking about just pardoning the nonviolent protesters, that doesn't work. There are many men who have, for pushing a cop or for saying something stupid or for whatever it is, crimes that on any other day of the year would have landed them in jail for a month or 6 months, have been in jail for 3 years and are facing decades in jail. That's wrong. Those men need to be pardoned, and the next president has to make that a part of his day one agenda. I'm Joe McBride. I appreciate you listening to me. God bless you, and I look forward to your response.